The question which looks at the implication of nature and nurture in the sociological development of humans has been a hot topic for centuries. It is the belief of many that both nature and nurture share a role in the development of the total man. According to scholars, nature focuses on the genetic makeup or biological inheritance of an individual or living organism. Every living being has a biological inheritance. Example: some animals are biologically designed to swim, some fly, and some to run extremely fast. According to documented sociological research, nurture differs from nature. Nurture is described as the social experience which makes up a living organism's life cycle. Example: wild tigers are nurtured in the wild to hunt viciously for their food. This nurturing is done by the adults within the tiger's family. In a zoo, these wild animals are acclimatized to a different lifestyle. Their food are usually prepared and given to them on a daily basis. When compared to the wild, their lifestyle adapts to the situation they existed in. Nurturing of human beings is similar. Children are usually mirrored images of their family and community's socialized norms, value, customs and mores. Many researchers argue the point that one or the other is ultimately important than the other. Based on human existence over the years and perhaps centuries, this argue has no basis, or does it? When carefully assessed, neither nurture nor nature can independently work to create a wholesome individual. The nurture and nature of an individual creates a continuum of both an inherent culture and genetically perfect or functioning human being. Let's look at this scenario. An individual has no one in the family weighing over 140 pounds. Based on circumstances, the exposure to several food types and the habit of eating between meals results in a member of that family weighing over 200 pounds. It is the nurturing of this member who determines the outcome of his or her physical structure and not the nature. However, this human being requires a character. The character of this individual, however, can view as a nature factor. Whether the person is shy, bold or jovial is not learned, it is inherent. Inherent behavior becomes a habit after years of practice. It can be assumed that both nature and nurture works in tandem with each other to create the whole human being or character. Keller, 2010. Whatever we learn from any external source can be viewed as nurture. Nurture involves a learner and an instructor. It is assumed by some researchers that for humans to realize their nature they have to be nurtured by persons externally so as to prompt their inherent nature. It is further assumed that the absence of nurture will result in a delay in the development of an individual's potential. For example, if a child lives within a home where everyone is a mute, the chance of the child speaking early will be rare. Indeed, it is evident that some level of nurture is required for human development. To believe that human behavior is pre-programmed from conception and that they react merely to stimuli based on instincts is to underestimate the development dynamics of human brain and body. The idea of humans being born with intelligence and learning habits would then be held in high regards by many sociologists, biologists and psychologists. Many researchers have spent years proving or disproving the notion that human intelligence is highly heritable and/or genetically determined. The response to this notion suggests a sense of validity exists. This is partly due to the fact that the human brain develops based on how it has been taught and socialized. Indeed, an individual's genetic makeup predetermines behavior. This behavior is not enacted unless it is nurtured by an outside agent. Sigmund Freud argues that a section of the human brain develop based on moral values, while other sections are developed based on the nature of the human being. It is safe to suggest that pieces of our culture are also proof that human behavior was mainly determined by socialization. Pinker, 2003. Sociology, nature and nurture are all interlinked to create a culturalized being or society. To understand a defined culture requires in-depth knowledge of the specific cultural heritage. Language is the easiest means by which one may easily evaluate and interpret culture. Language defines a society's culture. It is through language socialization is channeled. We are taught the norms of our society through speech, songs, movies, poem and normal conversation with each other. The value placed on this medium is great. Languages are the main aspect of communication. The variety of languages is socially formed by the place and heritage of every different community. Throughout the Caribbean, many countries develop their own labeled dialects. For example, in Jamaica the broken language referred to as patois, a broken language which embrace ancestral dialects and aspects of the standard language of the day, Spanish, English, French and Dutch. The acceptance of this language is dependent on the culture of the people. To believe the idea that humans' reaction is based solely on the genetic impulses is true, can be viewed as a fallacy. Scholarly research has proven that it is the combination of the culture of the human being in question and the genetic framework of her society which determines the reaction to stimuli. In sociology, human behavior is the term used to describe the things that people do. It is as a result of socialization our norms are transferred from one generation to the next. The practice of these norms inspires a culture which over time becomes inherent. This practice through socialization is considered nurture. The acceptance of this practice gradually inspires an individual and over time is considered a natural reaction to stimuli called nature. Both nature and nurture are inseparable. The question about which serves the greater good to man, nature or nurture, cannot be answered truthfully. Like our bodies having different parts and each having different purpose, so too nature and nurture has their varying functions amongst human. Both facilitate the full actualization and purposefulness of man. It's a given that all aspects of human behavior are affected by both nature and nurture, operating together. Some people have family genetics that gives them a great advantage in developing their musical intelligence or mathematical intelligence or verbal intelligence. You may have a complex mix of all sorts of genetic potentials for excellence in various aspects of human life. That does not mean that you will automatically develop those potentials, it merely shows that you have a genetic possibility for outstanding development. However, you may not develop your musical potential if you are raised in a home with no musical instrument or encouragement to pursue music. The above described scenario highlight how nature can affect our nurture. Our potential may be inherent and with good nurturing a positive result becomes the end result. Keller, 2010. On the other hand, the nurture of intelligence has many components. There are countless ways in which nurture affects our brains and smarts. First, there are chemicals that affect our intelligence. For example, children who eat food or objects that contain lead develop irreversible damage to their brains, and this reduces their intelligence for the rest of their lives. This is one of the reasons that laws have been passed to prevent lead from being used in gasoline and paint. The above describe a typical example of how nurture can affect our nature negatively. Both work together to achieve either positive or negative outcome. To adopt the thought that both can independently define a person's character suggests one simplistic view of the human development. It is our environment, nurture, which stimulates the development of our being, wholesome character, nature. What are the implications of nature and nurture and the field of sociologist? Nature and nurture are integral in the whole development aspect of human beings. Both collaborate with each other to return a unique character within every living human being, regardless of his/her culture, creed or race. Both nature and nurture has a specific role in shaping members of any society. Today we face several social problems. These problems may include poverty, crime and violence. It is believed that nurture is a stronger determinant of human behavior. Humans learn their behavior through their environment and social interaction. The idea of indulgence in a poverty-stricken lifestyle occurs as a result of one's environment including opportunity. Perhaps a criminal who was born to criminal parents did not view crime as wrong until he or she had already habitualized criminal activities. Such child would not regard extortion or the periodical robbery of an upper-class community. Better yet, the stealing of electricity is viewed by the child as a normal way of life. Individuals born into poverty learn actions and behaviors which lead them to be destitute as adults. They are brought up in an environment which leads to continuous poverty. Perhaps children born into poverty had to quit school to get jobs just to help the family make ends meet, and with the lack of education, they are unable to get better jobs as adults. This would all suggest that changing a person's environment would change their behavior. If a child brought up by criminal parents were to be adopted by non-criminal parents, their behavior would gradually change, and conform to that of the new parents. If a child brought up in poverty were to be adopted by a family that was better off financially, they would have more room for success in the future. However, environment is not simply in the home. A person can have law-abiding parents and yet still become a criminal due to peer influences, television, idols, etc. In order to radically change a person's behavior, their environment must be radically changed. Public policy would have to be based on the idea that changing a person's surroundings will change their behavior. Our system is at least somewhat set up based on this notion. Convicted criminals often go to jail, where they are separated from society and their outside lifestyle. However, this is currently not an effective way of changing behavior. While jail, juvenile hall, etc., may surround criminals with different walls, they are surrounded by other criminals and end up learning new ways to commit crimes and are more than reinforced when they are released. A better example would be Addiction Alert, which has a high success rate of helping alcoholics and drug users rid themselves of their addictions by surrounding them with supportive people, in a clean, supportive environment not associated with the consumption of alcohol and drugs. Public policy would probably be changed to have those in need surrounded by people who can influence better behavior, in addition to changing their remaining environment. It would be correct to suggest that nurture influences nature. This influence affects the behavior of an individual. It would unwise however to take the stand as John Locke, who postulated and researched the thought that living organisms are born with a blank slate. His argument suggests that this blank slate is dependent on nurture for instruct in the creation of living organisms with unique character. It is believed that genetics and nurture are twins which work simultaneously to create a unique being. Human nature is predetermined from the point of conception, which is instructed by a blueprint created by nurture. The view of nativists and their stance on human evaluation are greatly flawed and are widely criticized by empiricists. What is meant by nativism and empiricism? Nativists believe that humans are born with all their perceptual functions ready to be used, while empiricists believe that perceptual abilities have to be learned and adapted to. Overwhelming evidence support the idea that some parts of perception are learned and some innate, and although it tends to be the more complex ones that are learned, there is still no total certainty as to which are innate and which rely on experience. Regardless of the belief of many, the idea of nature and nurture working independently in the development of human beings should never be considered. The theory of natural law discusses explicitly the role of nature in the development of humans. Instances of nurture's impact on man's development were highlighted within his theory. How the role nurture plays in human cognitive development is considered minimal. Who is John Locke? What is his contribution to sociology? John Locke was born on August 29, 1632, in Warrington, a village in Somerset, England. In 1646 he went to Westminster School, and in 1652 to Christ Church in Oxford. In 1659 he was elected to a senior studentship, and tutored at the college for a number of years. Still, contrary to the curriculum, he complained that he would rather be studying Descartes than Aristotle. In 1666 he declined an offer of preferment, although he thought at one time of taking up clerical work. In 1668 he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, and in 1674 he finally graduated as a Bachelor of Medicine. In 1675 he was appointed to a medical studentship at the college. He owned a home in Oxford until 1684, until his studentship was taken from him by royal mandate. Locke studied medicine with Sydenham, one of the most notable English physicians of the 17th century. His skills in medicine led to an accidental encounter with Lord Ashley, later to become the Earl of Shaftesbury, in 1666, which would mark a profound change in his career. Locke became a member of Shaftesbury's household and assisted him in business, political and domestic matters. Locke remained at Shaftesbury's side when the Earl was made Lord Chancellor in 1672, making presentations to benefices, and eventually becoming his secretary to the Board of Trade until 1675, when Shaftesbury lost his title. Locke's ideas on freedom of religion and the rights of citizens were considered a challenge to the king's authority by the English government, and in 1682 Locke went into exile in Holland. It was here that he completed an essay concerning human understanding, and published Epistola de Tolerantia in Latin. The English government tried to have Locke, along with a group of English revolutionaries with whom he was associated, extradited to England. Locke's position at Oxford was taken from him in 1684. In 1685, while Locke was still in Holland, Charles II died and was succeeded by James II, who was eventually overthrown by rebels, after more than one attempt. William of Orange was invited to bring a Dutch force to England, while James II went into exile in France. Known as the Glorious Revolution of 1688, this event marks the change in the dominant power in English government from king to parliament. In 1688 Locke took the opportunity to return to England on the same ship that carried Princess Mary to join her husband William. Like Marx's Locke, academic writings were considered a revolutionary philosophy, thus inspiring the government/rulers of the day sought him to lay criminal charges against him. Locke's philosophies were considered profound by many within his days. Today these philosophies are considered by many anthropologists and sociologists as an explanation for the reason why people behave the way they do. John Locke argued against the philosophy which suggests that humans are born with innate experiences. He used every chance he got to share his philosophy that knowledge is not innate. Locke contended that there are no innate principles stamped upon the mind of man which is brought into the world by the soul. He argued that people who agreed that there are innate ideas could not demonstrate the innateness of ideas. He suggested that there were no principles to which all give assent, since principles such as whatever is, and it is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be are not known to children, idiots, and a great part of mankind, who never heard or thought of them. Locke here assumed that innateness was equivalent to conscious perceiving and argued that to be in the mind is to be perceived or to be readily recalled to perception. Locke argued that there is a capacity in us to know several truths but contended that this lent no support to the argument that they are innate. To argue that all men know and assent to certain truths when they come to the use of reason proves nothing, since they will also come to know many truths that are not innate. It would appear, then, that all truth is either innate or adventitious. Again, why should the use of reason be necessary to discover truths already innately in the mind? Locke allowed that the knowledge of some truths is in the mind very early, but observation shows such truths are about particular ideas furnished by the senses. For example, a child knows the difference between the ideas of sweet and bitter before it can speak and before it knows abstract ideas. Even assent at first hearing is no proof of innateness, for many truths not innate will be assented to as soon as understood. On the contrary, the senses first furnish us with particular ideas, which the mind by degrees becomes familiar with, remembers, and names. The mind subsequently abstracts from these particular ideas and gives names to general ideas. Thus, general ideas, general words, and the use of reason grow together, and assent to the truth of propositions depends on having clear and distinct ideas of the meaning of terms. Locke held it to be evident that particular propositions are known before the more universal and with as much certainty. Locke believed in empiricism and rationalism. He grounded all his ideas and knowledge in experience and his going beyond experience to the existence of things. Many of Locke's difficulties stem from his definition of idea. It is so broad that anything perceived or known must be an idea. But Locke assumed that we get all our ideas from experience, not in order to claim that nothing exists except ideas, but to show that there is an alternative to the theory of innate ideas. For Locke, experience is initially a contact of bodies and subsequently a reflection of the mind. He never doubted the existence of an external physical world, the inner workings of which are unknown to us. Locke believed that there are two sources of knowledge: sensation and reflection. The ideas we have from reflection are in some important ways quite different from those we have from sensation. Locke asserted that the mind turns its view inward upon itself and observes its own actions about those ideas it has, and takes from it other ideas. The important point here is that in reflection the mind observes its own action. It is true that Locke spoke of modes of the simple ideas of reflection, such as remembering, discerning, reasoning, and judging. Nonetheless, If the mind does observe its own action, then something more than ideas are the object of the mind in reflection, or else ideas of reflection are somehow importantly different from the ideas of sensation. This point will show up in a consideration of Locke's theory of knowledge. We have natural faculties or capacities to think and to reason. This is not, however, the same thing as having innate ideas, for if anyone means by innate ideas nothing but this natural capacity, he uses terms, according to Locke, in a manner plainly contrary to common usage. In a similar fashion, Locke argued that we have no innate moral or practical principles, for there is no universal agreement about such principles. Great varieties of human vice have been at one time or place considered virtues. We all have a desire for happiness and an aversion to misery, but these inclinations gives us no knowledge or truth. Locke was persuaded that there are eternal principles of morality, which man may come to know through the use of reason about experience. This, however, is far from proving them innate. Pinker, 2011. Locke argued further that no principles can be innate unless the ideas contained in them are innate, that is, unless men can be conscious of them. Impossibility and identity are hardly innate, yet without them we cannot understand the supposedly innate principle of identity, that it is impossible for the same thing both to be and not be. Similarly, the proposition that God is to be worshipped cannot be innate, for the notion of God is so diverse that men have great difficulty agreeing on it, while some men have no conception of God whatsoever. The idea of worshipping a God is learned, not innate. Locke suggested that the doctrine of innate ideas lends itself to certain authoritarianism and encourages laziness of thought, so that the foundations of knowledge are not likely to be examined. The expression innate ideas is an unfortunate one and admittedly extremely vague. It carries with it the suggestion that certain ideas and knowledge are, in Locke's sense, imprinted on the mind and are in no way dependent on experience. Pinker, 2011. Certainly there are passages in Descartes which strongly suggest that certain ideas are innately in the mind, and more than a few thinkers took this to be Descartes' meaning. Furthermore, Locke wished to prepare the ground for his own thesis that all ideas and all knowledge are acquired. If he overemphasized the crude sense of the theory of innate ideas, he also showed that even the refined doctrine is unnecessary in accounting for knowledge as it relates to the external physical world. Locke assumed the real existence of an external physical world and the substantial unity of a man in body and mind. He undoubtedly accepted the thesis that the external physical world is corpuscular and acts by bodies in motion that possess only those qualities which Locke called primary. Locke spoke of secondary qualities as powers in bodies to produce in our minds ideas that are signs of these powers but that in no way resemble the powers which produce them. Often he suggested that if we had the means of observing the minute motions of the particles making up gross bodies, we might have a clearer notion of what we mean when we call secondary qualities powers. Locke's position here is physical realism. It is not simply a manner of speaking. The ideas we have do represent real things outside of us and do constitute the links by which we know something of the external physical world. When we recapitulate all the points advanced for or against innate ideas by Descartes, Locke, and Leibniz, we still wonder what this controversy is about. Why is Locke, who acknowledges man's indebtedness to his faculty of reason, out to refute the innate idea theory? What are the relative claims of Locke and his opponents concerning this faculty of reason which is the point of dispute? If we look deep into the matter we find that both parties glorify the faculty of reason, and yet both dispute about its negation. Descartes claims that the function of speculative reason, intuitive reason, is enlightenment and understanding of God-given truths. For Leibniz its function is unfoldment and discovery of concealed truth which is within the soul. But, does this negation, enlightenment, unfoldment or discovery of truth require any specific labor? Both Descartes and Leibniz give a positive answer to the question. Descartes' method suggests the need of conscious labor for the attainment of truth. Leibniz also emphasizes the need of method and order. Locke makes a radical departure from Descartes in maintaining that the function of reason is not discovery or unfolding of truth. Its function mainly consists of sifting, identification, making distinctions, classification, judgment and association of data of knowledge provided by experience in the form of ideas. Knowledge, then, is a coordinated function of data of knowledge received from outside world and from within minds itself. Experience itself is nothing more than reception by the mind of certain sensations and feelings in a certain determinate manner. But the question is, are there any determinate ways of mind's acceptance of internal and external data? Locke does not specify it. Were he to do it, much of the misunderstanding concerning nature of knowledge, whether acquired or innate, would have been clarified. Nor do his opponents expressively lay down the role of experience and external data. Were they to clarify the contribution of sensible data and experience in knowledge, there would have been a fairly good possibility of a compromise concerning nature and origin of knowledge, by Bolingbroke, 2003. With so much said by Locke about innateness and Descartes, what is the inline philosophy of Descartes? Descartes' rationalism sees knowledge as accessible only by reason and not by the senses, which cannot be trusted. Boyle, 2011. Moreover, true knowledge is innate, that is inborn, in all human beings. Innate ideas, such as the equality of the three angles of a triangle to two right angles, are absolute truths waiting to become clear and evident through reasoning. They are immutable and eternal because they are part of the pattern of God's creation. For God has established his laws in nature and imprinted them on our minds, so there is no single one we cannot understand if our mind proceeds to consider it. Descartes' philosophy on innate ideas suggests that concepts present in the mind at birth as opposed to concepts arrived at through experience. The theory has been advanced at various times in the history of philosophy to secure a basis for certainty when the validity or adequacy of the observed functioning of the mind was in question. Plato, for example, asserted the inadequacy of knowledge arrived at through sense experience. The world apparent to sense was only a temporal, changing approximation of an eternal, unchanging reality. The next important occurrence of a doctrine of innate ideas, not directly based on Plato, is in the work of Rene Descartes. Among the ideas Descartes took to be innate were the existence of the self, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, the existence of God, and some logical propositions like, from nothing comes nothing. Boyle, 2011. John Locke, objecting that the doctrine encouraged dogmatism and laziness in thinking, advanced the classic attack on innate ideas. He argued that if certain ideas were innate they would be universally held and used, which is not the case. In contemporary discussion, the question of innate resources of the mind has been the subject of dispute between behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner and linguistic theorist Noam Chomsky. Chomsky has pointed out that the learning of a language and linguistic performance cannot be adequately explained by the empirical behaviorist model. In conclusion, nature and nurture is not a new phenomenon. The argument shared by several philosophers and sociologists begs the question as to whether or not either holds greater purpose in the development of human beings. The answer to this question cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. It is believed that both arguments are reasonably good. Note however that both theories are complemented with several critiques. The reality which exists is that human development with any society requires both nature and nurture, in order to be accepted as a member of a specific society and culture. Nature and nurture defines one's character. It is this character which determines whether you are Jamaica, American, or simply put a member of the Caribbean region.